is I don't know why we are increasingly not discussing the expenditure side of it.
Yeah, the expenditure side of the thing.
I mean, last year, when the budget policy statement was tabled in 2002, in February, the committee, I don't know whether erroneously, I think you are still there.
Which year again?
Last year, 22, for this current for this current financial.
The current financial year.
Sorry, 2002 is when I first voted. 2022, 2023. Last year. So work with the last year. Forget about the numbers. It was the first time the budget committee, which I came to learn later almost erroneously, had made a decision that they are not going to allow a deficit that is beyond what we can handle. And they had cut it to 400 billion. Basically, they had said, this deficit, cut it to 400 billion. What that was going to do is that it was going to reduce the deficit by half of that financial year. Because if you don't rein in deficit, you see, deficit has become, the number on the deficit has become almost a balancing figure. Yeah. You know, so that you just budget for anything, then you say, this deficit we will borrow. Right. You know, yet the reality is, and then even as you go into the financial year, and we have quite some numbers that we have analyzed, you realize the budget, many years, save for last year was the first year, that we had the deficit coming down from the initial figure. Right. The other years it went up by as much as 99%. So if we are not going to rein in the expenditure side of things, there is that story that is on, I think it's on page... the story that is on page 12. This idea about parastatals, government hanging on parastatals that are non-functional. Those parastatals occupy about 28% of our budget is spent by different forms of parastatals. The expenditure side is what is the trouble. I don't think this is a revenue problem. The government can, the government seems to suggest that all we need is more money and we will deliver on everything. No. Remember, even the president, when he came in, the first thing he committed is we'll cut the deficit by 300 billion. Right. Yeah? You say, yes, cut the budget. Basically, what you're doing is cutting the deficit. Because if you don't deal with the deficit, it does not matter what arrangements you come up with for borrowing. And the options then are just what he has said. You either tax more, there's a limit. You either borrow more, there's a limit. Or you privatize, basically you let off certain assets, right. You know, and why we are not engaging on what can we cut and still be able, all these private, parastatals, can we privatize them completely and get our hands off? You know, why should government continue to hold on to them, yet they are not necessarily bringing in any. So for me, I think the expenditure discussion has to be held.
But once you even privatize those institutions that are not generating revenue or sufficient revenue, and that fixes that current financial year, so subsequently you'd expect that they start now generating revenue for the country.
Yes, and if they don't perform, you wind them up.
You wind them up.
I mean, there are no two ways.
Okay.
That's how private sector operates.
All right.
If the business does not make economic sense, you wind it up. You know, you dissolve it. But you see, well, as long as it is a government institution, whether it's delivering or not, you still have to pay salaries. Yes. You still have to pay, you have to incur running costs. They still need they need offices. They need to travel to do the work, right. But when you move them away, then it means that they either, it's basically they survive or they are wound up here.
All right, let's take a look at